All right, guys, welcome to your lesson on evolution. So we were just talking in this cycle about how Earth and Earth's land has changed over time, and then how life on Earth has changed over time. So we're moving into the theory of evolution. So life on Earth, as well as the shape of Earth's surface, has a history of change, and that change is called evolution. Evolution is another word for how something changes. The evidence that organisms and landforms change over time is scientifically described using each of the following. So the theory of plate tectonics that helps describe changes in Earth's plate movement. The law of superposition helps explain changes and dates different changes in Earth's landforms and land masses, as well as life types because of fossils. And then the theory of evolution gets into changing over time. So it states that species change over time and that living things change in response to their environment. So as their environment changes, the living things change. The change results from a change in the genetic material of an organism and is passed from one generation to the next. So it's important to remember or to realize that with the theory of evolution, you're not just changing like your attitude about something or your hairstyle, but there's an actual shift and change in genetic material in that organism. And then that genetic shift is passed on from one generation to the next through meiosis. So this is a cool timeline showing you just evolutionary shift and change over time. Formation of Earth, 4.5 billion years ago. We have formation of the Earth's core, the moon, the oldest rock, evidence for oceans and earliest isotopic evidence for life. And then we're getting into some of the earliest fossils, and look at the rise of oxygen didn't even happen until 2 billion years ago. And then there's the first cells with nucleus, just under 2 billion years ago. And then dinosaurs. And then look at where humans are on this scale compared to everything else. We have existed for just such a very, very, very short amount of time compared to the formation of Earth. Here's a little review on Pangea and continental drift. So this again is showing you the change in the evolution of Earth's land masses. And here is showing you this awesome diagram, a little evolution of the skull, of the human skull. So between 2 and 3 million years ago, it was called Australopithecus. And look at how the skull has changed since then. So, theory of evolution, getting into it. Charles Darwin is known as the father of evolution. His theory is the widely held notion that all life is related and has descended from a common ancestor. Darwin spent time in the Navy and traveled to many places. So in his travels, one of the places he went was to the Galapagos Islands, and when he was there, he observed several different traits about finches that live there. Finches are a type of bird. He observed the finches with heavy, short beaks. They were good for pecking trees or seeds, and then there were other types of finches with small, thin beaks that were good for capturing insects. So he noticed the same type of bird, but with different types of beaks, and this got him wondering. So if you look, there's all these different kinds of finches, and they've all adapted. They have all shifted and changed genetically as a result of their environment to eat different things. So based on what the finch eats, it has a different type of beak and a different color. So these observations that Darwin made about his finches caused him to wonder whether the birds had evolved from similar species. He eventually developed a hypothesis that accounted for the diversity he observed, and this is called natural selection. So in natural selection, members of a species that are best suited to their environment survive and reproduce at a higher rate than other members of a species. Basically, this is called survival of the fittest. The most fit is going to survive, and the most fit for the environment that it's in. So Darwin based this idea on the following 4 things: on overproduction, variation, adaptation, and selection. And I'm going to go over each of those. So overproduction, when a species makes more than the environment can handle so that a good number have a chance of survival. So with overproduction, the classic example I like to give is in Finding Nemo, when they had all of the little eggs and Nemo was the only one that survived. Well, the reason that the species of fish, the clownfish, does this is because there's a lot of things that can happen to the babies. So they make way too many in hopes that some will survive. The slide just stopped for a minute, so I'm going back to here, and I'm going to have to say this again because I'm not sure if it recorded or not. So if it did record, sorry if you're hearing it twice. So variation is a very good thing because variation exists in the phenotypes of individuals within every population, all different species. And phenotypes, remember, are physical traits. So physical traits meaning what the organism looks like on the outside. And you want organisms to look different on the outside. Otherwise, for example, if we all had the same hair color and there was some crazy predator of humans that ate humans based on hair color, and it ate a certain shade of brown. If we all had that certain shade of brown, then we'd all be dead. So you want variation. It's a good thing for survival. I like to show this example. Yum, green beetles are our favorite. So if all the beetles were green, then the whole population would get wiped out. So over time, what's happened, and it's showing you generations later, over time there's more and more red beetles. So the beetles are actually genetically changing to be a different color based on their environment, and their environment meaning their predator. Different flowers have evolved color over time so that they can survive. The picture on the right is of twins. We wouldn't all want to look the same, or else we would not be able to survive. There wouldn't be enough variation. Again, variation, we want it. It's a good thing. All right, adaptation. So any inherited trait that gives an organism an advantage in its particular environment. So a great example of an adaptation, maybe a slight change in the shape of a tail fin might help a fish survive better by helping it to swim faster and avoid predators, compared to a fish that doesn't have this slight change in shape of its tail fin. This is cool. So a red maple tree, the little helicopter flippies that fall, these maple seeds, they have a propeller shape, and they have a propeller shape on purpose, and they're called helicopters. They're adapted to fly or helicopter away from the shade of the tree that it's falling from, which is called the parent tree, so that they fall into the sun so that the seeds can actually get planted on their own and grow new trees. If they fell straight down, if they didn't have these little helicopter things, then there wouldn't be any more maple trees. They would eventually die out because no new trees would form. So this seed has evolved over time to be able to do this, to survive. All right, selection. Over time, more of the fish will have tails that are shaped differently and will survive to reproduce. So these fish who have adapted and to have this slight change in tail shape, they'll reproduce, and more of them will eventually over time have this different tail shape, and they'll all be able to swim faster. And so as a result, they'll make up a larger part of the group. And that's exactly what's happening with the changing color of the beetles. Over time, these beetles have adapted to change color, so that this bird is either going to have to adapt to the change in color, or this bird's going to die out, or find a different type of food. So changes in environmental conditions are super, super important to understanding evolution because they go together. So changes in an environment can affect the survival of individual organisms as well as entire species. Organisms with characteristics that are well suited to the new environment are more likely to survive, and therefore higher rates. So here's the deal. The alleles, or genes, that are associated with the favorable phenotypes, so with the physical traits, so the fish that have this certain tail that they can swim fast, that's a phenotype. The genes of those fish will over time increase in frequency, and there will become more and more fish with that gene, which means it'll be more common, and then it will increase the chances of survival of that species. So same thing with the red beetle. The genes have changed. The physical traits, the phenotype have changed. It's going from green to red, and as a result, the chances that that species survive are much greater. Okay, so those it should say tails, not trails. Those tails of those fish are now going to be passed on. All right, so this was just a little review on phenotype, and depending on which cycle you have this, which year you have 8th grade science, if you have it your first year, then you have not had phenotype. You haven't had genetics yet. If you have it your second type, then this is review for you. So make sure that if this is your second year, you help out somebody in their first year with helping to really understand the difference between a phenotype and a genotype. So this slide says it all in short without going into like really much detail. Again, you'll get it your second year in a lot of detail. But phenotype is the physical trait. It's what you see. So the phenotype for the person on the left is blue eyes, and the person on the right is brown eyes. And the genotype for the person on the left is just the gene, the letters that make up blue eyes, is little b, little b. And the genotype for the person on the right for brown eyes is big B, little b, or big B, big B. So genotype is just the gene. It's the letters that make up that genotype. And the phenotype is what that gene looks like on the outside. This is really cool. So this is a type of predator for this plant. It looks maybe like a broccoli or a collard green leaf, some kind of green leaf. And this worm or aphid type, slug type caterpillar thing has adapted to camouflage itself onto this plant and therefore eat it. So it serves as its habitat, and it also serves as its food. All right, diversity and survival. So within a species, there's variability. So there's differences in phenotypic traits. So meaning things look different. And that leads to diversity among the organisms of the species, which is a good thing. Diversity is good for survival. The greater the diversity, the greater the chances are for that species to survive during environmental changes. If we all, let's see, if we all died when we got the flu, then whenever the flu came every year, it wouldn't come every year. It would come once, and it would wipe the whole human population out. However, we all have different genetic diversity, and we have different susceptibility and different levels of tolerance for dealing with certain things. And because of that, we're able to survive different environmental changes. So, pieces of evidence supporting evolution. Vestigial organs, which these are organs that were fully developed and used by our ancestors, but are smaller and unused in current. So some cool examples of vestigial organs are Darwin's point on the ear. There is wisdom teeth. We all have, most of us have wisdom teeth. You get them pulled out. We don't need wisdom teeth, but we still have them. And they're examples of vestigial organs. Body hair. We don't actually need our body hair. It's a vestigial organ. Eyelashes, again, eyebrows. We don't need those. We don't live out in the wild anymore. But we still have them. We haven't evolved to not have them anymore. Similar structures with different functions. This one's really important too. Many species have similar organs, but they have a different purpose in each species. A good example is the bone structure in lizards, bats, and manatees. I have a good diagram coming up in a second. This similarity means that they shared a common ancestor at some point. So here's a cool diagram with a human, a cat, a whale, and a bat. And it's awesome if you look at the colors, let's start from the bottom. So look at the fingers, human fingers. Look at the cat, the whale, and the bat. They're all very similar, but they have changed depending on what the organism is. Then move up one. They all have metacarpals, the bones leading to your fingers. Then you have the wrist, the yellow going across to all four. The ulna, which is your lower arm bone, going across in all four. the radius, which is the top part, and then the humerus, the white part. And it's so amazing to look at the similarities in a human and a cat, a whale and a bat. All four so different, but yet all have very similar structures, but that serve very different purposes. Bats and whales couldn't be more different from a human and a cat. I mean, human and cat are the most similar compared to a whale and a bat, but they're different organs, different structures, different functions. Last part of this lesson is on biological classification, and it's a system which is used to organize and codify all the life on Earth. And that's called taxonomy, when you put something in a certain order, classify life. This allows scientists to examine relationships between various organisms, as well as the relationships between current and historical organisms. So here is the order of classification. So kingdom up at the top. So kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I believe many of you have probably seen this before in most likely 5th or 6th grade science. And some of you might know an acronym for the remembering the order of these. I have heard in the past students say King Philip came over for green spaghetti. I've heard lots of different things, so if you want to come up with your own mnemonic device to help you remember that, you can. If you look going down, so you would look at the tiger is the animal kingdom. The phylum would be Chordata. The class is it's a mammal. And the order, it's a carnivore. The family, it's feline. The genus is panther. And then the specific species. So, I'm sorry, that's not a tiger, that's a cheetah. Or panther, rather. So if you look, it's an animal. And then it gets more specific with each one of those. So kingdom, it's least specific. And then species is most specific.